So talk to me a little bit about what this auction has done in terms of certainly Planet Hollywood as a name, as a brand, as an experience is built upon the nostalgic, warm feelings for these actors, for these movies, and for the memories that they brought us. I assume that this auction sort of has the same impact for you on Planet Hollywood itself, because you are getting to relive and discuss and think about sort of how these props came together, what led to their assembly, and what led to their display. So, talk to me sort of about how you're feeling about this auction as it begins approaching.
Sure. This auction is an extremely exciting, pivotal moment for Planet Hollywood. We've been around now since 1991, and we have pivoted from just restaurants to casinos to major resorts around the world. We're continuing to grow now, and as we grow, we want the name culturally to go down in history. And so doing things like this with you guys gives us the chance to just spread the whole happiness. We have a very deep bench collection, and we have many items that for a lot of years have just been in storage. And so Joe has pushed me many, many times. Come on, Robert, let's share them. So I think this is the beginning of that. This auction, whilst it is huge, and I think it's a 3-day odd event, plus some that is just online, it's still just touching tip of the iceberg of the depth of our collection. But we're going to allow people to enjoy a lot of our pieces. We've been acquiring them from other auctions and other methods since 1990 before we opened. And this is just a great chance to share.
You know, it's interesting, right? In 1990, when this collection was begun to be put together, there was not the value, sort of emotional, financial, spiritual, however one chooses to classify it, that we put on these props, these costumes, these pieces of memorabilia today. I believe 30 some odd years ago, most of these props, whether some of them were hiding, I believe, if I recall correctly, one of the axes from The Shining was actually in a barn somewhere. There were things that were very difficult to find because people didn't understand their cultural worth, much less their actual tangible worth. So, you know, I'm curious, as you think back upon the assemblage of this collection, what memories you have of putting this together?
The collectability of memorabilia has been around for a very long time. In the 90s, when we started, movie collecting was in its infancy, but it already had a high value. In a previous life, I'd been the boss of Hard Rock Cafe and learned a lot about memorabilia during those days and different methods of acquiring it, from gifts outside the dressing room after the artist had finished a 3-hour set and was dripping with sweat and very kindly put their arm around me and gave me their guitar, all the way to bidding against crazy people in auctions, including one or two very famous people that money was no object. And they just keep putting their hand up and depressing me as we had to go higher. So it's all been evolving. Art forms are always evolving. What is priced out of people's range allows for different type of collectors. And I think that's what's happened in the movie world, sports world, and even the music collectability.
Were there particular pieces at the beginning, at the creation, at the outset of Planet Hollywood that you knew you wanted? Because certainly you had Stallone, Schwarzenegger, and Bruce Willis. So there are the expectations, right, that there will be key pieces from their significant films and their highlight moments. But I assume that you obviously were looking well beyond the scope of the initial investors and the initial partners.
Oh, yeah. Well, my partner was a guy called Keith Barish, and he was a very successful film producer. So he opened lots of doors and had lots of memorabilia from his own movies, and we all had our personal likes. They weren't necessarily what the guests wanted to see. In New York, where we did a display of more scary items and more sort of Beetlejuice type items, they were far more popular than more important pieces with higher value. So it depends which audience, Robert, one was playing to.
Right.
So I love things that had a past that I was connected with. I remember acquiring Ursula Andress's bikini as she came out of the water. I think it's 1962 in Dr. No. And like, I got such a kick out of that. But Keith was busy giving us the entire Fugitive and the Train and all these crazy pieces at that time.
So how was it decided? I've always been interested in how it was decided which items would go into which museums, which restaurants. Because I remember certainly in Dallas, there's the gun that shot JR. That makes sense to have that in Dallas. There are regional specific pieces. So how was that discussed, as certainly as the restaurants began to expand exponentially during the early and mid 90s?
It would generally evolve to a mass brawl with fisticuffs in the middle of the night. But conceptually, it started just where you were, which is what is important for Dallas, what was filmed there, what celebrities came from there, what local partners did we have from that region, and what could we acquire and amass that had that type of relationship, and then it would be interspersed with important memorabilia that every single city had been to see that particular movie. So, I mean, pretty obvious plan. The brawling occurred when one partner wanted it in one place, the other partner wanted it in another place. The contractor said it wouldn't hold that weight. The lighting was in the wrong place, and I was freaking about the construction change orders. So, yeah, look, great memories.
I mean, talk to me a little bit about them, right? Because that's what this is about. This is about the memories. Because certainly that's the idea behind the restaurant itself. You come to eat because you come to see these things with whom you have shared memories, whether it's with a parent or a child, right? You want to sit beneath a Terminator, or you want to eat near and go see Judy Garland's one of the dresses from Wizard of Oz, or the sword from Flash Gordon. There, I mean, we could sit here for 20 hours naming the 1,500 items in the auction, much less the thousands and thousands of pieces that were in Planet Hollywood over the years. But I just sort of am curious about your memories of the assembling and of the creation and of the expansion over that glorious period where you couldn't look in Dallas in 1994, from the moment the restaurant was hinted at, much less the lease was signed, there must have been a piece in the paper every day about who was coming for the groundbreaking, which would have been Stallone in that case, who was coming to sign the wall, who was coming to sign a piece of memorabilia. And I assume it was like that in every city during that period.
And the more exciting part of that is not just every city, but every country around the world. So the reason why Arnold, Bruce, Sly, Demi Moore was so important is they transcended every international barrier. Mm-hmm. So sometimes comedians or romantic artists didn't have that crossover, but these guys particularly was instant recognition. We could be walking in Jakarta, Indonesia, and it would be less than 3 minutes, no exaggeration, before a few thousand people were behind us screaming Rocky, Rambo, or whatever else. And going into places like Paris and Rome and Berlin were just wonderful experiences for our talented partners as well. Whenever I see them, we all reminisce about those great times. So in terms of you're asking me about the actual installations and everything that goes into it. I mean, we had a very large department. Everyone was, we still do, everyone was focused on the way we would install it, the ability for people to walk around the whole space, ignoring guests sitting at table, but having a complete view of what was going on. And hopefully before you left, you would have taken a lot of photos. My only regret is that we predated social media, Instagram. I keep saying to myself, if only you would never have had some of these things that you have now, because everything took place in our restaurants. They were Switzerland, neutral ground, where competing talent they threw it all away. They didn't care. It was just a place to enjoy each other. And we just had fun wherever we went.
Well, it's funny. I remember reading about the stories about how much fun everybody had coming to the events, how much fun everybody had at the events themselves, and the openings of these. Obviously, every opening was, I think is it Oprah who says in the 1995 ABC special, it's like the Oscars, but bigger, but better.
It's very kind. But no one was paid to come to anything. Obviously, they were shareholders, quite a few of them. So there was a benefit there. Obviously, we treated them because we were so grateful that they would come. They weren't promoting a movie at that time. They were just giving their all to Planet Hollywood because they enjoyed it and got to see their peer group in a friendly environment.
What do you recall? I'm fascinated by sort of the cultural experience of it, right? Because there was so much written about it. And it was a lot of people trying to sort of get a grip on and trying to understand what Planet Hollywood meant. Because, you look back on it now and think, well, this was really the first sort of chance people had to experience memorabilia. There were no museums. There still aren't very many of them. It was a place to come experience it, a place to come eat, a place to, people couldn't quite understand, was it kitsch? There certainly was a little bit of that, but because it was so big, it was so glamorous, it was so expensive. It was pop culture writ enormously large. And as someone who had, a father who was in show business himself, you certainly understood the potency of celebrity, the potency of spectacle. And certainly that's what Planet Hollywood brought.
Yeah. Look, I think you summarized it. I hate when you keep using the word was, because we still believe it is. But don't worry about that. But
we'll cut all that. We'll cut all of me out.
No, I'm just talking generally. But I think that what it all was down to is, as a consumer around the world, unless you were in LA or possibly New York, you never touched anything except seeing your idols on a screen. You never touched the memorabilia. You never saw the real celebrity. You didn't have an involvement in any extension of the movie or their lives. And we afforded that from when you sat at the table and there were these photos of your school yearbook where you were challenged to say, who is that celebrity now? To seeing everything on the walls, to seeing unique video content that was just exclusive to us, to the talent coming through the building. And just, we tried to take an extension, to Oprah's comment, of the red carpet experience to you wherever you were. And that definitely worked. And then the ongoing maintenance of that, having events that happened everywhere on an ongoing basis, it just separated you from any other accessible dining entertainment experience.
So I want to go back to October 22nd. How were you nervous? Did you think, all right, you certainly had the experience in other iterations, whether it's Hard Rock or things that had come before. you know that there is a likelihood of success. You certainly have three of the world's biggest names attached to it at that point. But what was that experience like of just opening that New York location?
The biggest nerve-wracking experience about the New York opening was the next day. Until you know, you feel everything is right. You feel you've done it all, but are they going to come? And, boy, did they come, waiting 2-3 hours for a burger, for 2-3 hours to get inside that building, to be able to purchase for $15-17 something that Cindy Crawford was wearing, when normally it's unattainable at 25 grand in those days from Versace. So we did everything right. We were blessed with the biggest talent in the world, and so we had great access to the media, and we came up with a really great value project. We only charged in the restaurant the same as other restaurants charged. And people never gave us credit for that. We didn't need to get it, but we didn't get credit that, just a minute, did it cost more to build than other restaurants? Yes, probably 3 or 4 times. Was the art inside worth 20 times more than anyone else's art inside? Did they spend a fortune promoting, etc., etc.? So we did everything right. There was so much chatter about it, and probably the opening lines would discourage you from coming regularly, because your perception would be that all times of day and night it was the same type of line. So that was another communication issue that over the years one has to overcome. But I mean, the opening night itself, it couldn't have been more magical. When I think of the guest list that would walk in that had nothing to do with the opening, whether it was Versace, Donatella, whether it was Elton, whether it was Eddie Murphy, whoever it was, and then you've got Michael J. Fox jamming with Bruce. You've got everything going for you, and an enormous crowd out on 57th Street, and New York is unquestionably the home of the media. I don't care what anyone says. There are more photographers, more TV crews, just more newspapers and magazines, old school. And so just, it was the right place at the right time.
Was there more pressure on opening New York because it was the first, or Los Angeles a few years later because you were opening one in Hollywood?
Each opening has incredible different memories. Los Angeles was a pinnacle because I think it was ABC did a 1-hour special in prime time of a restaurant opening.
Planet Hollywood Comes Home.
And there were probably, I remember the bills, there were probably over 200 famous people. We couldn't get anyone in except for the great talent. We closed the entire rodeo down. Elton John performed on one stage and Bruce Willis with Chuck Berry on another stage. And it was just wonderful.
That's, I think, the one where Luke Perry says in the promo that reminded him of what Hollywood was like in the 30s and 40s, with the spotlight premieres, with the big sort of moments where celebrities would walk onto podiums and talk to news cameras before a movie began.
Yeah, well, Luke epitomized everything that was good about Planet Hollywood. He didn't have an enemy in the world. Everyone loved him from every walk of life. Every celebrity used to hang out with him. The fans were crazy to see him, and he loved Planet Hollywood. He would always be there for us. He traveled around the world with us, and he'd just do anything he could. It was just above and beyond, and we have many instances like that.
What are some other memories you have of folks like that who were intimately connected, not simply because they were friends and stockholders, but because they believed in what Planet Hollywood was about?
Oh, too many. I have to be reminded. You say a name and then it sort of
Well, it was
springs up.
interesting, right? I mean, you'll go back and look at all the people who were associated, whether Patrick Swayze, who were at some of these openings. And I remember being at the one in Dallas, and there's Swayze, there's Chuck Norris, there's both Cowboy coaches. You managed to get the current Dallas Cowboys coach and then the one who had preceded him, who did not like each other. They both managed to come. You get Roger Staubach, the legendary Cowboys quarterback, and then you get Troy Aikman, who was on his way to winning 3 Super Bowls with the Cowboys. And it was always interesting to me because I always wondered, was it because you asked them, you invited them, or was it because they knew they needed to be there?
We would invite to any opening all the important people from the city that we were opening in. Absolutely nothing to do with politics, but everyone current, relevant, anyone to do with the history of movies or TV. Didn't matter if people hadn't seen them for years. We insisted that we sent a limo to bring them because it was their night as well as ours. Mm-hmm. So I don't think it hurt that whoever the person was, they were likely to be packed and photographed and videoed and be seen in the right place. But they actually all enjoyed it. We are party throwers extraordinaire. We do not approach it like, well, Robert's been down the red carpet, he's done his job, goodbye. This Robert, not me. We do approach it that we want to make sure from beginning to end that you talk about us and want to come back and want to spread the word. And also, a lot of the local people, they took a back seat to the more national and international celebrities, but after that day, we would always do things with them. So whether it was the Cowboys or the Mavericks or the city itself or helping children, all of those things would always happen in the following year.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about the assemblage of what we're offering in this auction.
Yes.
Because I assume at one point, because if I'm not mistaken, at the beginning it was just one guy, right? Going and trying to track down as much as possible outside of what you might have been made available through different connections, whether it's through partners, shareholders, and celebrities who were associated with the restaurant. But obviously, to amass a collection like this one, I assume at some point it became an incredibly overwhelming number, or not a large number of people who were involved in putting this together.
The Planet Hollywood memorabilia department has always and still continues to be quite a few people. Those people are constantly curating, constantly checking and maintaining, just looking after everything carefully, etc. When we started, I would say the largest amount of the collection was amassed through auctions and purchases. Mm-hmm. At some point in time, every memorabilia middleman in the world knew that we were hot prey for them, that they would be out scouring with our support, probably representing that they were in-house when they weren't, but we were constantly offered collections, and our litmus test was generally, would the consumer enjoy it? Did it have the right notoriety? And of course, most important, how did we authenticate and validate and confirm its legitimacy? Obviously, when there have been auction houses like yourself involved, you go into it very deeply. You check on all provenance. You do so many different ways of testing, and so did we at the time of purchase. We amassed it all in Florida in a very large space, perfectly air-conditioned, perfectly locked up and secure, and we continue to operate in that manner.
So how did it be? It's interesting going through the catalog and just the tip of the iceberg of that catalog. It's fascinating to me given the breadth of the history, because one would assume that, well, it's going to be a focus on, well, Die Hard 2 or Predator or Running Man or Demolition Man or Ghoulies and, more current movies, Ferris Bueller, all the things that were popular at that point. But certainly what I think made it so successful and so meaningful to so many was the fact that it went back to really the birth of Hollywood. Was that always the intention?
The intention of the collection was to appeal to everyone, including ourselves, what we thought the value would continue to increase on, what we thought different guests in different countries. We were constantly looking to see top movies, top shows in Korea or in China or in Germany or in Phoenix, so that we had a good understanding. But then we got to the stage where we'd also buy out the complete set after a movie was being dismantled. And sometimes that would be able to be split into many, many restaurants. But we wanted a broad collection. And one of the reasons for this auction is that the age group now that come out to a restaurant is probably too young to enjoy some of the greatest movies that ever existed, that we've now put pieces into the auction that collectors are going to go crazy for.
I assume you're talking about Marilyn Monroe, Judy Garland, James Dean, things like that have begun. You don't want to say that they've been forgotten or erased or ignored by a generation, but certainly the further we get into things, the Terminator becomes their classic. It's not Giant or Wizard of Oz or 7-Year Itch.
And I hope Arnold's not going to watch this. I don't mind if he does. Sometime even that will expire in its current relevance.
So is that how you and Joe worked in terms of putting this auction together, picking the pieces that were meaningful to a certain generation, whether it's a generation who came of age in the 70s, 80s, and 90s watching these films, or certainly prior to that? Because I certainly look at something like Zed's Chopper from Pulp Fiction and think, well, my 20-year-old son knows what that is. My 20-year-old son will see that and he'll get a big charge out of that, but maybe that's because I just raised him right.
Yes, although I think Joe corrupted all my team when I wasn't watching so that he could choose the best pieces. But generally, I think that we've just taken a sampling from every period to put in this auction, and if it goes well, I'm sure Heritage and us will be doing more.
Are there things that are in this auction that you're like, man, that's going to be hard to part with? I can't believe I'm letting that roll out the door.
Many.
Yeah.
Many.
I assume
and it's a sore subject, and you shouldn't bring it up because else I will review them again and then start the fights with Joe.
Well, I'm always all for somebody picking a fight with Joe. I'm fascinated by who, it's interesting. We talk about the fact that collectors are caretakers or custodians for a small amount of time, right? We can't own the things we love forever. At some point, they belong to somebody else. They belong to the larger pop culture consciousness in a big way. I assume that's how you feel about this collection as well. It was good to have them at the moment. It was necessary. It was enjoyable. It was headline making. But at some point, everybody should have their chance to take care of, appreciate, and live with these things as well.
I'm not known to share. When it comes to dessert in the meal, you'll lose your fingers if you try to share with me. But I do think that there's always a moment in time. And with a lot of the new technology and the new methods to display things and the consumer looking for their Instagrammable moments and just the way technology is going and the ideas that are out there with those dreaded words of AI, etc., it's the moment. It is the time where some great pieces could be shared in different ways. I'm sure some museums around the world will buy them. I'm sure some great collections will buy them, and hopefully they will in turn display them to many hundreds of thousands of people back in their own environments.
You know, you do talk about Planet Hollywood in the present tense, and I want to make sure that I do that. I know that there are still Planet Hollywoods that are opening, that are planned for opening, but certainly the one that for our purposes, the February 22nd opening of the one on Robertson in Beverly Hills. I assume that is something that you must be anxiously anticipating, given sort of its return and the spectacle and the display that it brings back to Los Angeles.
I think it'll be fun. I think a lot of people will be there. I'm not sure how many pieces we're going to display.
I think it's going to be quite a few.
Great. Yep, and we're going to do some fun things and a big event around it.
I'm looking forward to that. I will be there for that.
Excellent.